Please welcome the Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, conducted by Charles Chucky Dickerson.
Wonderful evening, everyone. I'm having a great conference, hoping that you all are as well. We want to begin by talking about the importance and generativity of this year's theme. As program co-chairs, we offer our own interpretations, not as the way to make sense of it, but as an invitation for you to reflect on how it speaks to your research, practice, and commitments.
Last May, we met with scholars and educators from within 100 miles and the Presidential Committee. The group was made up of representatives from every division and 2 SIGs. We held a 2-day convening that was informed and inspired by this year's AERA theme, Unforgetting Histories and Imagining Futures, Constructing a New Vision for Education Research.
The sustained and energizing conversations in those meetings gave rise to the presidential program that you're experiencing. I've heard so many people say that there's so many good sessions happening at the same time, and that's a good problem. So it just reveals just how generative this year's theme is. The theme has been reverberating throughout all of the sessions and convenings.
So we invite you to consider how this year's theme intersects with your personal, professional, and educational lives, and we offer our 3 individual interpretations as a mirror for you to reflect on your own, not as a model or exemplar to follow.
That means, oh, there we go. Thank you, Maisha, for inviting me on this journey. Thank you to Keisha and Cam for your camaraderie and your inspiration, and to Mispa and Christina for your help and support and brilliance. The theme of unforgetting histories and imagining futures brought me back to my grandmother, my Nani, Helen, seen here at her painter's easel. I'm partly named for her. My Nani used to say to me, Mary Helen, you're going to get to go to college. Imagine you'll have a place to live. You'll have food to eat cooked by somebody else. And you can devote your whole self to learning. She said the word like it was a dream. Nani was an artist, but she never had the opportunity to formally study art. She had the scars across her palms from the elementary schooling she was able to do. After 8th grade, she cleaned houses. I'm living her imagined future in many ways. I'm a human development psychologist and a neuroscientist. From that perspective, Maisha's theme also resonates. Neurobiologically, the very same physiological systems that keep us alive, that feel our guts and our viscera, that conjure consciousness, are those we use to remember. I don't mean semantic and procedural memory so much, but autobiographical memory, the memory for having been there, for the experience, for the narrative we tell. And in turn, those brain systems for consciousness and feeling, for self-awareness and agency, are those through which we build beliefs, values, identities, and purposes. Amnesic patients who have lost their memories are unable to imagine the future. If you ask them, what would you feel like if you won the lottery? They don't know. So, as often happens, the science is reaffirming human experience. The act of unforgetting histories is, neurophysiologically speaking, the process by which we build a sense of self and imagined futures. It makes us literally more awake and more alive. Thank you.
Thank you. I was born and raised in this city, neighborhoods nearby. That's right. But this photograph, sadly, is of the last time I was in the Philippines, 46 years ago. My parents, I'm sitting next to my parents, now ancestors, who, with all due appreciation for their sacrifice, migrated to the so-called United States in search of a better life. It is one small, intimate archive representing longer histories of family journeys and silenced losses that come with dispossession, displacement, migration, and miseducation. But what stands out most about this year's theme is its insistence that history is more than a record of harm. It is also a record of wisdom, hope, and care, carried across oceans, generations, and communities. Unforgetting histories and imagining futures is a reminder to remember what? To remember how the past is present in the current moment, to honor the legacies of brilliance and resistance that has always sustained our people, and to recognize young folks and their cultures as creators and carriers of humanity, with their own insights about justice, joy, and radical possibility. Ultimately, my hope is to help construct new visions for education research focused on teaching, teacher education, humanization, and decolonization that can help create a world where people aren't forced to leave the communities they care about the most or the homelands that raised them in order to find a better life.
Hi, AERA fam.
Hey, hey.
Hey. I am Keisha Green. I'm an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And it's been such an honor to be one of your program co-chairs for the 2026 annual meeting under the dynamic presidency of Maisha T. Wynn. To you, Maisha, thank you for being my advisor, my mentor, and my friend. Bearing witness to how you move with such poise, preparation, and power has been a tremendous gift. And to my esteemed program co-chairs, Mary Helen and Cam, what a ride. Together with Christina and Misbah, we are the LA Dream Team. Now, yep. Now on the screen, this is my maternal grandmother. She's pictured here sitting fully self-possessed with a knowing smile and a confident refusal to not be taken asunder, as if to say, after all the things I've been through, I still have joy.
Yep.
This world and whatever stands proxy for oppressive power structures can't have my story and can't have my joy. So when I think about unforgetting, I think about reclamation and remembering the pieces my grandmother left me. Unforgetting that I am from people who have always, long made something, everything, out of very little, and still made joy. This theme threads together Maisha's personal and scholarly lives, as you can see from the orchestra, the DJ, and all of the elements across the conference. The theme is a constellation of work done and work still to come. My interpretation of the theme centers on all of us across disciplines developing an archival literacy. Archiving as a method informed my own scholarly journey, from sitting on the floor at Emory and Maisha's office, archiving her collection of every issue of Vibe magazine, or being in Vanessa Siddle Walker's basement, going through the Black teacher organization records and working at the Emory archives. These experiences confirmed my understanding that the futures we imagine, are always shaped by the histories we refuse to forget. Through the conference theme, President Wynn has invited us to develop this kind of archival literacy. As Jones Royster declares, archival literacy is a way of drawing on the historical artifacts of our living to make the hidden visible, to uncover voices, contributions, and forms of knowledge that have been overlooked or erased. To study history is to study humanity. To archive is to unforget. One of our favorite locals, Octavia Butler, reminds us that to foretell the future without studying history is like trying to learn to read without bothering to learn the alphabet. So, Sankofa, go back and get it. This is our charge. This is our mandate. Thank you. And now we have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Wynn's sons, Obasi and Zafir Wynn. They are such kind, brilliant, tremendous young men. For Obasi and Zafir, AERA has been a part of their lives for as long as they can remember. Now they're on the slate. The oldest, Obasi, who was doing the podcast in the exhibit hall. He's currently a 9th grade student who has attended over 10 AERA conferences. Beginning with his first in New Orleans, we remember that one. He enjoys listening to music, collecting vinyl records, and photography. Obasi is currently playing, advance. Obasi is currently playing varsity golf for his school, and one of his most memorable AERA experiences was in Chicago, where he began to fully appreciate the scale and impact of this gathering. During the 2026 annual meeting, Obasi can be found hosting an AERA podcast. If you haven't seen it, go check it, where he's interviewing AERA members about their work for a youth audience.
Obasi's brother, Zafir, is a 7th grader who enjoys playing in local and national golf tournaments, drawing and traveling. He has attended 6 AERA conferences. And delights in learning new things and exploring different places. Together, they know AERA not just as an event, but as a community, a place to reconnect with AERA members who are now family and friends, where there is hugging, laughter, reunion with aunties, uncles, and cousins. The second page of this. They are now familiar with the rhythm, the movement, the fullness of the conference schedule. Not too long ago, Obasi and Zafir asked their mom a question. Are we going to be AERA president's kids one day? A future already imagining itself.
So, as we think about unforgetting histories and imagining futures, we are reminded some of those futures are already here. They're in the questions young people ask. They're in the communities we build. They're in the traditions that we carry forward. And they're in the lives that are watching us, learning from us, becoming alongside us.
So it's our honor to introduce Obasi and Zafir Wynn. They both remind us that the future is not abstract, it's becoming among us. AERA fam, let's welcome Obasi and Zafir.
Good evening, everyone. First off, I want to thank to whom our mom calls the LA Dream Team with Dr. Cam, Dr. Keisha, and Dr. Mary Helen. Thank you for that amazing introduction. You all are truly the best. this afternoon, my brother Zafir and I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing our mom, Maisha, for her presidential address. While many of you know our mom as Maisha or Dr. Wynn through her academic talks, research, publications, or collaborations on research projects, my brother and I have the privilege of experiencing another side of her. In our day-to-day lives, she's not just a professor and a scholar, but she is a mom, a mentor, a wife, a sister, a golf caddy, a yogi, a Peloton loyalist, and a proud member of the Beehive, constantly balancing all these roles with grace and with joy. It's a delicate balance, and we don't take it for granted. We appreciate her for always showing up as a professional at the highest level, while also protecting our joy and bringing hope to others. Whether it's leading faculty meetings at Stanford, mentoring PhD students, writing tenure letters, or publishing yet another article or book, she always shows up with integrity and with brilliance. But more than that, she holds it down, she makes her presence felt, and she lifts everyone up with her smile, with her laugh, and with her kind words. I've been watching this for years, from attending ARA conferences with her, to overhearing her Zoom meetings while I'm doing my homework. What amazes me most is that even on her busiest days, her love is always felt in our home. And I believe that is because she is a woman rooted in her faith, in her family, grounded in her values, and shaped by a legacy of excellence.
What's going on, everybody? My brother and I are proud to share this moment with you this evening. We would be remiss not to acknowledge our grandparents, Cheryl and James Fisher, who played a profound role in shaping our mom's life. Although my brother and I never had the chance to meet our grandmother, we grew up hearing stories about her inspiration that she provided during important moments in our mom's journey. Our grandfather, who passed away just last summer, was also deeply influential. Dr. James Fisher was bold, thoughtful, and intentional with his words. The way he held court at the table, sharing wisdom and purpose, left a lasting impression. We see that same presence in our mom. Whether she's speaking at a conference or at home, she brings intention, connection, and a powerful sense of presence. Being her sons is one of the greatest gifts in our lives. It is truly an honor to call her our mom and to witness the impact she has on so many lives. Today, we are proud to share her with all of you, not just as a scholar or as ARA president, but as the person who has shaped us every day. Please join us in welcoming our mom, Dr. Maisha Wynn, for her presidential address.
Can that be my speech?
Oh my goodness. They made me wear my noise canceling headphones when they were practicing today, so I had no idea what was in store. Obasi and Zafir, I am endlessly proud of you. I am beyond grateful for your love and support this year. You handled your business so that I could handle mine. Thank you for being a part of my AERA journey. And I cannot think or imagine a better way to mark our 2026 annual meeting than with the gift of young people and music. Bravo to the musicians in the Inner City Youth Orchestra Los Angeles and their conductor and longtime music educator, Charles Chucky Dickerson. Justice Lopez, thank you for being so intentional with your DJ set, your treatment of our annual meeting theme, and your preparation and execution is awe-inspiring. And to all of you who took this year's theme and made it your own, it has been so humbling to be in your sessions. Of course, I would not be standing if it were not for my program co-chairs, AKA the LA Dream Team is in the house, Keisha Green, Mary Helene Mordino Yang, and Patrick Camignon, who we all know as Cam. As well as my graduate student from Stanford, Ms. Nasir, and postdoc fellow, Dr. Christina Hugo. Creating and building with you this year has been one of the greatest gifts of my professional career. I thank you, your partners, your children, your fur family, and loved ones for sharing you with me and this process for 1 year plus. It is humbling to see the level of service many of you have invested in AERA, from our executive board and council to our myriad committees, divisions, and SIGs. When I reached out, you said yes, amid so much unfolding in your personal and professional worlds. Saying thank you hardly seems like enough, but please know how grateful I am for our collective work. I wish to acknowledge all of the past AERA presidents who provided a foundation and framework for how to do this work. I would speak all your names if there were no time constraints. However, I want to acknowledge Naila Nasir, Deborah Ball, and Hilda Borco for walking closely with me throughout my presidency, despite all their commitments and responsibilities. And while I cannot confirm this, I feel as if Tyrone Howard, Sean Harper, and Rich Milner orchestrated a text messaging campaign to check on me. Their messages of love and support, overall kindness and generosity were always on time. Thank you. And of course, the president does not work alone. Thank you to our past president, Janelle Scott, and our president-elect, Jerome Morris, for all of your heavy lifting and love this year. AERA is in excellent hands with our new executive director, Dr. Tabby Chavis. And our entire AERA team in DC. Our team is small, but they are powerful. Please thank them when you see them. A huge shout out to my incredible students and colleagues at the Stanford Graduate School of Education and the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. I see you. You are the source of endless inspiration and possibilities. Thank you to my godmother, Reverend Adora Iris Lee, who goes above and beyond for our family and who stands in the gap in the absence of our parents. Thank you for being here. And anything that I've ever wanted to do with respect to the Academy has been wholeheartedly supported by my husband, Dr. Tory Wynn. Perhaps even to a fault. I recently recalled a time when I fell ill before a big talk, or maybe I was nervous, and I anticipated that my husband would encourage me to cancel the event and take me home. Instead, he disappeared and returned with countless bottles of Gatorade and kept talking about Michael Jordan Game 6. So here's to Game 6, here's to Tory, and here's to Team Win. And last but not least, I want to thank Teresa T.J. Ambo and Kelly Stewart for their teachings and generous welcome to the Tongva land. They taught me the difference between a land acknowledgement and a land recognition. They also taught me the importance of a labor recognition. And I wish to express my profound reverence for this land. So many of our communities have cultivated this land in my home state of California. Indigenous, Mexican, Black, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, white. We are not the first to be here, nor will we be the last. In 1993, when Octavia Butler published Parable of the Sower, she envisioned the United States of our current moment as an unrelenting plague of housing crises, addiction crises, climate crises, violence, chaos, and fear. She depicted Southern California as swaths of walled communities from which neighbors must innovate together to keep safe from daily dangers that include the large segments of the population who are armed, desperate, and addicted. Butler's teen protagonist, Lauren Olamina, must also navigate the hereditary trait of hyperempathy that affords her deep relational connective tissue, but can also bring acute risks to her own well-being. Despite uncertainty and amidst deepening chaos, Lauren turns her focused attention to solutions and plans for the future. In one of Lauren's journal entries dated March 4th, 2025, Lauren experiences an aha moment. She realizes her best friend Joanne is uninterested in future-focused discernment or preparedness to become future-ready, accepting fate as predetermined and her own lived experiences and agency as too limited to make any difference. Firmly of the opposite mindset and intention, Lauren disagrees. We can get ready. That's what we've got to do now. Get ready for what's going to happen. Get ready to survive it. Get ready to make a life afterward. Critical of adults waiting for the good old days to come back, Lauren is certain that she and her peers must be imaginative, collective, and intentional to pursue new ways forward. Comparing people in fast-changing societal contexts to unprepared visitors experiencing culture shock in an unfamiliar region, Alvin Toffler coined the phrase future shock. Future shock describes the even more challenging dynamic of navigating the unfamiliar in spaces where one could reasonably anticipate what's next. Toffler conceptualized future shock as the shattering stress and disorientation that we induce in individuals by subjecting them to too much change in too short a time. Toffler was imagining over the next 30 years, people would experience an abrupt collision with the future, which for many will have arrived too soon. Octavia Butler's young protagonist, Lauren, had a healthy mindset in a culture of future shock, a mindset focused on priorities, preparedness, and self-determination. We are situated witnesses to future shock in our communities, nation, and world. Since January 2025, against a backdrop of profound societal rupture, threats to and actions against institutions have been fast and furious. As we gathered for our annual meeting in Denver in April 2025, myriad executive orders related to education were being released. An executive order entitled Reinstating Common Sense School Discipline Policies was released on the first day of our annual meeting that suggested unlawful equity ideology compromised student safety. As we navigated these executive orders, we were also learning about various forms of our artificial intelligence and seeking to understand the role of AI in the future of teaching and learning across the globe. And as many of you have experienced, the dismantling and reorganizing of institutions such as the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, Institute of Education Sciences, and the National Endowment for the Humanities resulted in the cancellation of grants, disrupting education research. The deployment of the National Guard and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to U.S. cities, resulting in violence and chaos, created a culture of fear and profound uncertainty about the future as our students across the lifespan attempted to navigate their lives in schools and their communities. and the fact that I could have changed this part of my talk and slide daily underscores the volatile nature of our ever-changing social and political landscape leading up to this evening. In the throes of our collective and very personal experiences of future shock, educators and education researchers were expected to react to everything, everywhere, all at once, with little time and few mechanisms to imagine, plan, or create conditions and practices for future systems and dynamics we want to prioritize and pursue. Eager to dream, imagine, and catalyze new goals, as well as ways to impact learners across the lifespan and across contexts with students, colleagues, and community, I drafted our theme, Unforgetting Histories and Imagining Futures, constructing a new vision for education research. As I revisited the work of Toffler, I felt drawn to his assertion that we shall find it increasingly difficult to understand our personal and public problems without making use of the future as an intellectual tool, and that we who explore the future are like those ancient map makers. Our ideas as educators and education researchers, as well as our pedagogical practices, theories, and methodological interventions are less final word than first approximation, to borrow from Toffler, of what's possible. For our time together this evening, I wish to build an arc for how we can use the future as an intellectual tool in both education and education research. We often imagine the future of education as something we must create and innovate. However, I want to suggest this evening that the future is already here. It lives in our archives and histories of people-led movements for self-determined educational futures. I invite you to engage with foundational tools for foresight and futures thinking, while also considering how historical inquiry can and should be at the forefront of any conversation about the future. Executive Director of the Institute for the Future, Marina Gorbis, recently argued that Toffler's premise can and should be taken a step further, positing that the future should be democratized. She envisions and seeks to normalize futures as a safe space where people can abandon their immediate turf interests to think about new possibilities, new constituencies, and things that might be unthinkable today. Director of Multiverse Design, Leah Zaidi, equates the future with a story that's malleable because it does not yet exist. Zaidi looks to storytelling as an important tool for world building. That is the process of constructing a complete and plausible imaginary world that serves as a context for a story. Acknowledging that equating the future with a story can make future thinking feel ephemeral, beyond reach, and beyond consensus, Zaidi further asserts that the future is an understudied act of intentional design. And while the future may be an understudied act of intentional design, I seek to demonstrate how everyday people have enlisted the future as a tool for organizing, creating, and building independent institutions when mainstream institutions were unable to meet their needs. Gorbis asserts that we need to make futures thinking a way of life for more people outside the enclaves like Silicon Valley, corporate boardrooms, and academic think tanks. Envisioning and making the future must be a massively public endeavor. I agree. And right before the COVID-19 pandemic, I participated in a foresight workshop at the Institute for the Future in the heart of the Silicon Valley, where Gorbis serves as the executive director, to think about new ways about why and how a futures matter pedagogical stance might strengthen my research on mindset foundations for restorative and transformative justice. Studying foresight gave me a more expansive lens to think about how futures can be purposefully designed and executed. According to the Institute for the Future, Foresight tools help us imagine things that don't yet exist, challenge basic assumptions, examine unintended consequences, anticipate strategic opportunities, develop new offerings, evaluate plans and roadmaps, build readiness and shared perspective. The first step in the foresight process is looking back to prepare to look ahead. Some may recognize this as Sankofa work, a reference to the Akan people of Ghana, meaning go back and get it, represented in our art design for this year's annual meeting. Others will see the lineage of Indigenous pathways. For me, the intersections of histories and futures have been a scholarly focus throughout my career. How can we leverage histories to innovate in the present toward the future? This involves historical ethnography, engaging with primary source documents and artifacts, and putting these historical artifacts into conversation with people who were and are a part of the story. Such processes allow us to examine the practices, learnings, and strategies, for example, of people who have worked collectively to transform their communities and community service institutions. In forecasting work, stakeholders collect and examine signals of change or evidence of the future we can find in today's world. Unfortunately, forecasting can take shape as a transactional endeavor. Like futurist Ben Hamamoto, I believe we should be wary of anyone who forecasts for the future alone, because any legitimate envisioning and pursuit of desired future norms must be communal. This stance led me to imagine a different way of engaging this work, and I call it futuring. Unlike forecasting, futuring by definition and by intention is relational and distinctly values moving toward the future as a collective. Futuring is intentional collective planning and future making that prioritizes, reflects, and seeks to spark innovation, sustainability, and opportunities for self-determination across and through the domains of education, wellness, and economic prosperity. In my most recent book, Futuring Black Lives, Independent Black Institutions, and the Literary Imagination, I explore the term and tools of futuring to describe the approaches and outputs of Black institution builders who establish their own coalitions, networks, and sites for shared learning during the Black Power and Black arts movements of the 1960s and 1970s. I refer to my work as historiography for the future. That is a methodological intervention that repositions historical contributions to education as world-building innovations. Historiography for the future explores maps created in the past and those map makers' intended audiences. This methodological intervention is concerned with how we might leverage histories and futuring alike as tools in the present to ensure that more people have access to thriving futures. Science fiction author and Afrofuturism scholar Ytasha Womack notes that those making claims on the future often assert the need for a so-called incredible apocalypse to begin anew. Afrofuturists, according to Womack, acknowledge that some of those apocalyptic things have already happened to people. In an interview featured in the docuseries A Brief History of the Future, Womack asserts that communities on the margins have long had time to think about liberating themselves or claiming their humanity. There have been important challenges to my work and my decision to engage with futures and foresight tools, because they are often thought of as forms of capitalism that promote individuality and competition. Certainly, foresight work has too often promoted pathways to get to the future early, even if that involves exploitation or leaving certain people behind. However, non-dominant communities have been futuring long before individuals and organizations referred to themselves as futurists and their work as forecasting. Historiography for the Future is a reclamation of futures work, an opportunity to access what Chris Gutierrez and colleagues refer to as everyday ingenuity, and what Bird, Alexander, and Rickford describe as ideas in unexpected places. While foresight processes examine signals of change, historiography for the future asserts that those who are keenly interested in thinking about the future must analyze historical signals alongside current signals of change. I define historical signals as innovations of the past that hold potential implications for future work in a particular domain. Historical signals reposition innovation as having historical roots and foundations, as opposed to situating any innovation as an entirely new concept, idea, or invention. While I am particularly compelled to study historical signals found in 1960s and 1970s Black Power and Black Arts Movement era journals, newspapers, magazines, and the lived experiences of the visionaries who created them, another example of historiography for the future work is the Bulosan Center for Filipino Studies at the University of California, Davis. There, the Huelga Digital Archive is maintained, quote, to provide access to documentary and ephemera material regarding the Filipino and Filipino-American experience. Named after novelist, activist, and migrant worker Carlos Bulosan, the Huelga Digital Archive makes oral histories and their transcripts available to the public, in addition to artifacts and photographs. Historian Lorena Marquez, author of La Gente, Struggles for Empowerment and Community, Self-Determination in Sacramento, co-created the Sacramento Movimiento Chicano and Mexican-American Education Oral History Project. Undergraduate students in Marquez's qualitative research methods classes at UC Davis conducted 125 oral history interviews with elders who were active in the Sacramento Chicana movement between 1965 and 1980. Marquez's research focused on the collective work, largely orchestrated by women behind the scenes, and the inspiration they drew from Black liberation movements. This archive is housed at Marquez's alma mater, CSU, Sacramento. Both of these archives make the stories of everyday foot soldiers for opportunities and access available to the public. Historiography for the future involves a commitment to cultivating citizen archivists, a term that I first heard from special collection and library archive scholar Angela Fritz. I think of citizen archivists as independent, self-determined curators of histories with a keen eye toward the future. Citizen archivists simultaneously care about the preservation and everyday use of materials. For every archival gem in a university special collection or historical society, another surely remains unseen. So many maps of the future of education that speak to pressing issues in education are hidden in boxes, under beds, stacked in basements, or forgotten in closets and elsewhere. In her 2025 AERA Distinguished Lecture, Vanessa Siddlewalker alluded to our potential to value and learn from such resources, to utilize these archival gems to address matters of shared importance in and through education. Siddlewalker's challenge, tag, You're It, was also an invitation to excavate new terrain or revisit well-worn landscapes of education research in search of what we may have missed. For 2 decades, I've been learning from the archives and stories of these Black institution builders from the 1960s and 70s, with a focus on institution building during the Chicago Black Arts Movement. While a wealth of scholarship examines the Black Power and Black Arts movements in the fields of history, literature, sociology, and others, there has been little research focus on these movements' contributions to education. Recent and important contributions to the still evolving area of research and education examining the decade following the Civil Rights Movement include Elizabeth Todd Breland's A Political Education, and Worth Camille Hayes' Schools of Our Own. Both offer powerful narratives of the complexities and contributions to education made by independent Black institutions established during the Black Power and Black arts movements and their role in the Chicago education ecosystem. Independent Black institutions, or IBIs, often house P-12 schools, publishing houses, food co-ops, healthy eateries, community learning spaces powered by parents, artists, and educators. To date, the most comprehensive study of independent Black education is historian Russell Rickford's We Are an African People. More recently, Zenzele Riddick's study of St. Joseph's Community School in Boston, 1969 to 1985, and Christian Wilkes Scholarship examining Columbia Point Educational Program on Mother's Island, 1965 to 1973, demonstrate how IBIs built capacity for children and their families as lifelong learners. And while beyond the scope of our time together this evening, it is important to underscore that IBIs were built on the foundations of self-determined education during enslavement, Reconstruction, and beyond, as documented by our association's historians. I cannot give the Academy sole credit for my orientation toward histories or futures, or the powerful intersection of the two. The seeds of futuring for education were planted in me by my parents. Inspired by a collective sense of purpose, spurred by the Black Power and Black arts movements, my parents joined other parents, educators, artists, organizers, and neighbors who chose to affirm their humanity by embracing Blackness not just as color, but culture and self-conscious practice. These movements taught Black children how to engage locally, nationally, and globally, and to see themselves as powerful contributors to the world. In May 1971, student organizers from the Sacramento Black Awareness Committee, affiliated with Sacramento State University's Department of African American Studies, held the Getting It Together, a service conference for Black survival. Conference aims were action-oriented, in their words, to identify, develop, review, emphasize, and assess in the name of self-determination and self-reliance in and through education. One output was the creation of Shule Jumamose, a Black community school established by my mother, the late Cheryl Fisher, with Bertha Gorman and Martha Reed. My mother recruited my father, the late James Fisher, to develop the Shule Jumamose curriculum. My father was a doctoral student, finishing his dissertation, examining the history of the political and social development of the Black community in California, 1850 to 1950, and teaching history and Black studies at Sacramento City College. As they planned for Shule Jumamose, they amassed pamphlets, books, newsletters, and periodicals from IBIs throughout the United States, resources that prioritized concrete and specific practices. These maps sparked ideas, stirred imaginations, and ignited the creativity of my parents' co-teachers, who included students from UC Davis and Sac State. Importantly, these primary sources helped my parents and their comrades understand that they were not alone in their struggle to imagine what a purposeful education could look like for children, to engage in acts of futuring for the next generation. My research team organized the archive into 3 areas: teaching and learning, the socio-political context, and intellectual foundations. Against the backdrop of social and political ruptures of the 1960s and unrealized promises, expectations, and hopes of the civil rights movement, visionaries with little money and no formal institutional support from foundations, universities, or the government put their best thinking and resources together to create intergenerational learning spaces. My parents were among them, as were members of our AERA community: Joyce King, Carol Lee, Jabari Mahiri, Kofi Lamote, the late Mwali Mushuja, Asa Hilliard, and others. Historian Peniel Joseph notes that the civil rights movement and Black Power movement had a sort of poetic symmetry. The former focused on key figures, while the latter focused more on collectives of people committed to creating vital education ecosystems for their children and their neighbors' children. Therefore, Futuring in this context reflected what Carol Lee refers to as a commitment to the collective, the intentional prioritization of being forward-thinking and imaginative over being reactionary. Like Butler's fictional character, Lauren Olamina, these institution builders did not allow the wounds from future shock to fester. They dared to imagine, articulate, and pursue conditions for a purposeful education guided by three focal pillars: identity, purpose, and direction. I ask how these usable paths can contribute to thinking and learning in the present, how educators and education research communities can be informed by historical actors and outputs as we address education's most pressing issues. I have been hearing so many of our members asking how we can move forward together amidst so much upheaval and harm. While there is a sense that our historical predecessors have navigated challenging conditions in the past, many of us want to know how we can learn from their past struggles. Here I integrate Futuring with archival revisit of publications created and disseminated by Black institution builders. Print culture during the Black Arts Movement was used to catalyze Futuring. IBIs created and disseminated newspapers, journals, magazines, pamphlets, and books, abundant with world-building mindsets and tools. Several blended literary arts and politics, and a number of these publications originated in California, including Soul Book, established in Berkeley in 1964, the Journal of Black Poetry, established in San Francisco in 1966, and the Black Scholar Journal, also established in San Francisco in 1969. These were examples of print culture used for self-reflection and for holding IBIs accountable for their stated aims and goals. A powerful presence in the Shule Jumamosi archive is a collection of the Black Books Bulletin quarterly literary journal published from 1971 to 1981 by the Institute of Positive Education, or IPE. IPE was an IBI established in 1969 in Chicago by artists, educators, parents, and organizers, including our own Carol Lee and her husband, Black Arts Movement poet Haki Madhubuti, formerly Don L. Lee, Jabari Mahiri, who served as the Bulletin's managing editor, Soyini Walton, who served as the lead science educator, and Kimia Moyo, who served as a lead mathematics educator, as well as other visionaries. IPE emerged just 2 years after Madhubuti established the Third World Press, a Black publishing house that celebrated its 59th anniversary this year. Like many IBIs throughout the country, IPE established a school, the New Concept Development Center, which became a full-time early childhood school in 1974 and continues to offer an African-centered preschool education for children ages 2.5 to 5. Part of a movement throughout the United States and abroad to engage print culture as a futuring tool, IPE positioned Black Books Bulletin as a literary journal offering, in their words, critical reviews of current and future writings by Black authors. Contributors engaged the struggles of the day with a keen eye for possibilities on the horizon. A thread throughout was the importance of children and families, health and wellness, and Black psychology, with contributions from Wade Nobles, Naeem Akbar, and Asa Hilliard. A recurring section dedicated to reviewing children's literature, called Books for the Young, presented a range of possibilities of what the world could offer and learn from Black children, their families, and communities. IPE used the pages of the bulletin and Books for the Young to situate and articulate an expansive definition of educators, to include parents, guardians, and teachers, as well as other what they called influencers of children. In what could, in hindsight, be seen as foresight, Madhubuti's editorial in the 1971 inaugural issue positioned the Bulletin Literary Journal as an influencer of influencers, with a desire, in his words, to supply positive information and images to Black people who influence other Black people: teachers, postal workers, police officers, librarians, students, doctors, lawyers, dentists, nurses, writers, artists, and others. Contributors throughout the Bulletin's tenure provided a wealth of ideas and perspectives. Therefore, my attention to mapping some of these contributions is less an attempt to be destination-oriented as much as it is an offering to show what's already been rendered possible. The Black Books Bulletin Winter 1974 double issue on children and education was a case study in futuring for education. A quote from Madabuti's 1973 book, From Plan to Planet, appeared on the cover of the special issue, in which Madabuti asserts, "The most important asset a people has is its young," before further noting the need for generations of youth who can challenge the future we're bound for. One of the lead articles, penned by young adult literature author Sharon Bell Mathis, exemplified the Bulletin's commitment to tapping the literary imagination in service of world building. Mathis, known for her books Teacup Full of Roses and Listen for the Fig Tree, used the Bulletin's platform to explore what she referred to as true-false messages in children's literature. She explicated passages in books that had been deemed classics and must-reads. Mathis challenged these so-called classics and argued that they were laden with vivid self-hatred producing images, and juxtaposed them with literature that provided more nuance to the Black experience. In one example, she affirmed John Oliver Killen's retelling of the story of the carpenter Denmark Vesey, formerly enslaved abolitionist. Mathis lauded Killens for telling the truth in this book by showing how Vesey was a committed reader, thinker, and organizer. For Mathis and other institution builders, elevating a lone figure was not the point. Killen's children's book also demonstrated how Vesey used his education to galvanize his community. And Vesey's story felt fresh among some of the early biographical children's books about Black figures. The Bulletin's Book for the Young reviews often criticized the retelling of children's literature about the usual suspects: Phyllis Wheatley, George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, not to undermine their compelling contributions, but because they wanted children to be introduced to a vast array of thinkers. The Bulletin's Book for the Young reviews expressed concern for the first wave of so-called diverse children's literature, focused on individual achievements rather than community efforts. Literature and the literary imagination were in conversation with the social and political moment throughout the Bulletin's tenure. Mathis' explication of children's and young adult literature provided a window into some of the curricular considerations for IBIs before turning to their strategies at a systemic level. At the time this special issue was published, IBIs of this era were inclined to work collectively, several under the umbrella organization, the Council of Independent Black Institutions, or CIBI, and others as part of the Pan-African organization, the Congress of African People, or CAP. It was not unusual for the Bulletin to highlight the experiences of other institution builders, both within these umbrella organizations and beyond. The Bulletin's editorial choices reflected the Black Arts Movement Local, National, Local, or LNL model, conceptualized by poet Kalamu Salam. According to Salam, the activities in IBIs first had to identify local needs before moving into macro-level partnerships and returning to the local context for action. Despite being based in Chicago, IPE highlighted education work beyond the local by using the pages of the Bulletin as an embodiment of the LNL model. In this spirit, another contributor to this special issue was educator and institution builder Jitu Weusi, formerly Les Campbell. Weusi co-founded an IBI called the East in Brooklyn, New York. The East housed a K-12 school called the Uhuru Sasa Shule, or Freedom Now School, a printing press, and an independent newspaper called Black News with the stated mission to agitate, educate, and organize. Additionally, the East opened a healthy eatery and a music and performance venue where some of the most famous jazz musicians donated their performances to raise money for the school. Elsewhere, Weusi admitted that their school was initially an angry reaction to the 1968 New York teacher strike, in which Black and Puerto Rican parents in Brooklyn's Ocean Hill-Brownsville sought community control over their neighborhood schools. While much has been written about the Ocean Hill-Brownsville struggle for community control of schools, less has been said about the work that Weusi and other Black and Puerto Rican parents and educators did after they left the New York Department of Education to establish the East. In his Black Books Bulletin article, From Relevance to Excellence, The Challenge of Independent Black Institutions, Weusi called on IBIs to maintain academic rigor and curate learning environments where students could think and evaluate for themselves. He argued that just being relevant is not sufficient for Black education. Weusi called for IBIs to hire what he called highly skilled educator technicians who consented to being immersed in a constant process of learning themselves. He argued that IBIs needed to develop tools that held them accountable for the space between their promise and performance. Another contributor to this special issue was Tayari Kwasalam, co-founder and teacher of the Hidiana Work Study Center, established in 1973 in New Orleans, Louisiana. In addition to opening a preschool, Hidiana curated a bookstore, a publishing company that offered printing services to the community, and published their own quarterly magazine, Nkombo. Like Ipe, they understood that in order to create schools, they also needed to create their own curriculum and write their own literature. Salam's contributions to the bulletin highlighted pedagogical practices used with the Hidiana students. Hidiana co-founders intentionally used the descriptor work study center as opposed to school. According to Salam, Hidiana taught children the balance of work and study, underscoring in their words that to work without study is aimless and to study without work is fruitless. Salam underscored the importance of showing children how civic engagement works, and she wrote in her article, "Our children must be allowed to watch and participate in the decision-making process. This calls for consciousness on our part. This demands that we always be aware of what we are doing and are requiring children to do. This also means that we do everything in a disciplined manner, which means that we are in full control of ourselves when we make moves." In sum, the special issue of the bulletin addressed both curricular and pedagogical needs and encouraged IBIs to educate children to be engaged civic actors. Children were encouraged to find a greater purpose outside of themselves. The contributors positioned children and youth as conduits to the future, with a nod to their historical predecessors. Historian Vincent Willis reminds us that children, not adults, were central to the fights after Brown versus Board of Education. Referring to their actions as audacious agitation, Willis argues that youth activism in many ways played a bigger role than legislation, and IBIs honored youth agency in this way. But perhaps there was no better visual image of this thoughtful modeling of collective work and shared leadership for future generations than these Ipe visionaries and children. Strategically placed on the inside back cover of the bulletin special issue on children and education, this image was part of an advertisement introducing readers to Ipe's myriad activities and services, a food co-op and nutrition seminars, a library and bookmobile, educational aids and publications. And what continues to stand out for me today, as much as it did when I started analyzing these primary sources in the Shule Jumamosi archive, is the statement, an idea becoming a reality. This table, one of Ipe's first spaces to meet, dream, build, plan, and execute in their storefront building on the south side of Chicago hold some clues and cues for how to engage in futuring. This work was intergenerational and collaborative. A baby's bottle amidst papers and children on the laps of adults who were not their parents signaled their commitment to working not just on behalf of the next generation, but to have them witness the work. At EPE and other IBIs, children learn in real time how to collaborate, as well as what self-determination could look like. EPE's lead science teacher, Soyini Walton, noted that they did not have much in terms of material resources, but they did have each other. EPE's act of presenting themselves in the back of their journal, as opposed to the beginning, was an act of humility and acknowledgement that it takes many people and ideas to do the work of futuring. After countless hours of archival digging, analyzing primary sources, and interviewing the visionaries behind these maps, I thought I was bringing this work to a close, until a conversation with EPE co-founder and Black arts movement architect Haki Madhubuti opened a new portal that I hope we might traverse together. He said, "Maisha, you know, we were not just in the book business." And I thought, okay, I can handle that. And then he said, "Maisha, we weren't even in the education business." And then I got a little worried that I got this whole thing wrong. He said, "Maisha, we were in the ideas business." Perhaps I was too narrowly focused on the outputs, the schools, the curriculum, the literature, and the other print materials, when ideas were always the through line. Idea generation and execution or practical application of these ideas were at the forefront of this decade plus of institution building. For EPE visionaries, the notion of being in the ideas business ensured that the struggle for teaching and learning, for an engaged citizenship and participation would continue despite attacks like the systematic disruption and undermining of these institutions by the United States FBI's counterintelligence program, the misinformation about the scope of these institution builders' work that they spread, and of course, severe economic constraints. Despite these obstacles, EPE visionaries collectively underscored values of futuring that shaped their work as educators. They were intentional with their words, actions, and how they presented themselves to their communities and world. They were willing to struggle, especially if that struggle was for children. They curated intergenerational and communal spaces for teaching and learning, and they believed in shared leadership roles and responsibilities. They were realistic about scale and followed the local, national, local model. And finally, they prioritized imagining over reacting. In our current dynamics of future shock, it might be worthwhile for our communities to view our work as part of being in the ideas business as we engage in acts of futuring. Futuring asks us to commit to the collective, harness our ideas, and continue to innovate while looking both ways, behind us for historical signals and in front of us for signals of change. How can we think about the future as an invitation and opportunity to collectively imagine and design self-determined futures of collective well-being, clarifying and testing pathways forward through educational research and practice? Futuring in the age of AI poses its own possibilities and tensions. Ethan Mollick offers a perspective of AI as a form of co-intelligence in which we humans must keep humanity at the forefront of our interactions with AI tools. Chris Chapman, founder of Kingmakers in Oakland, reminds us of the importance of other forms of AI, such as ancestral intelligence. In a letter to the Kingmakers community, Chapman reminds stakeholders that they too are in possession of great ideas and potential for innovation. Chapman's letter to the Kingmakers community reads, "In our quest for empowerment and reclamation, we draw upon the profound wisdom encoded within our DNA, the ancestral intelligence that pulses through our veins. Rooted in the enduring legacy of our African ancestors, this reservoir of knowledge, spirit, and soul spans centuries, offering a roadmap for progress and resilience. True enlightenment transcends mere algorithms and computations. Artist Kara Walker offers AI as ancient intelligence. In a stirring exhibition, Fortuna in the Immortality Garden Machine, a respite for the weary time traveler at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Walker assembled a haunting collective of automatons dressed in Victorian clothing, engaging with the stages of life, death, and rebirth. Fortuna, the fortune teller automaton, dispenses paper fortunes to the patient museum goers. Walker has shared in interviews that she first enlisted ChatGPT to create these aphorisms using prompts such as liberation struggles and Afrofuturism and Afropessimism. However, she found these responses to lack the fire and soul she desired and chose to write 100 plus of them herself, quote, proving that her human sensibility was not yet replaceable. Historiography for the Future, Becoming Citizen Archivist, and my work with the Shule Jumamosi Archive have taught me the importance of another form of AI, or what Elizabeth Yackel and Deborah Torres call archival intelligence. While Yackel and Torres focus on practices and processes associated with user knowledge in the archives, I would add the need to educate future generations that their histories are valuable and worthy of curation. Additionally, scholars from across disciplines have the responsibility to examine the historical context in all of the work that we do in the name of education research. At the very least, education researchers should seek out the historical context for any question asked, site visited, and communities consulted. Futuring, then, values arriving to the future as a collective with all of our intelligences intact. Black institution builders were unafraid of the future. They cared about how to leverage new technologies in service of the imagination and problem solving, but also sought out the ancestral, the ancient, and the archival. They created their maps that can aid us as we create our own. And we're going to need more citizen archivists to excavate and hold space for relevant past examples and stories of innovation. So what does this table look like now? How is our membership setting these tables for stakeholders? My research team is imagining what this table could look like in the present through our Families as Futurists social design experiment. We seek to understand how families from non-dominant communities can take up foresight and futures tools as they map their children's education futures. We guide families, which include parents, grandparents, and mentors, along with middle school, high school, and early college students through the futuring process. Together, these families explore historical signals as well as signals of change as they generate plans and ideas for their future of education. Nicole Pinkard and colleagues are engaging in opportunity landscaping, using the historical context of Chicago, from redlining to desegregation, to co-create visible ecosystems that support learners and their families navigating STEM opportunities throughout the city beyond school. Mary Helene Mordino Yang and colleagues at the Center for Affective Neuroscience Development, Learning, and Education, or CANDLE, have discovered how adolescents have the capacity to flexibility to fluidly and fluently move between past, present, and future while engaging in what they call transcendent thinking. In sum, we have more future-ready Lauren Olaminas than we think, who are developing empathy and the desire to be visionary leaders. Brandon Reynante, Nicole Ardoin, and Roy Pease' participatory design research examining how high school students are expanding climate imaginaries and restoring climate futures that are agentive and purposeful demonstrates how youth are harnessing histories and the current moment for future action and change. And some of our colleagues are already curating archives like the Teaching in the Urban South, or TITUS, the Rolling Archives, and the Black Teacher Archive. In closing, I wish to invoke a moment from the film, A Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, that examines the assassination of the former Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba. Watching the film is akin to witnessing Romare-Bearden collage in motion as it brilliantly weaves together primary source footage of Lumumba's activism and Black American jazz musicians. At one point, a clip of an interview with the pianist and composer Duke Ellington appears at a poignant moment in the film. The interviewer asks Ellington, "Where do you get your ideas?" To which Ellington replies, "I got a million dreams. That's all I do is dream, all the time." The interviewer coyly responds, "I thought you played piano," noting the irony that he was in the presence of one of the greatest pianists and composers who did not take that moment to cite his skills, ambitions, or even his accolades. Ellington, who is also known as the Duke, calmly responds, "No, this is not piano. This is dreaming." This is how I feel about education research and the work that we need to do collectively. This is not merely education research. This is dreaming. Futuring brings textured visioning and coordinated actions to dreams. As a collective, we have opportunities to build the futures we want for the next generations, which requires more than reacting, but curating these spaces to dream, imagine, and act. Futuring in education research should be, urgently needs to be collaborative. Our innovations should simultaneously consult our usable past and use the future as an intellectual tool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.